Hey there, I'm Beletsky. Before we begin, if you aren't familiar with my rating system, you should watch the explanation linked in the video description. Remember that these first impressions reviews are made in the context of Gaining Grounds 1 with everything that we know about that meta, so some options' usefulness may change with the introduction of Gaining Grounds 2. Anything stated in this video is ultimately my own opinion. If you disagree with anything I say, let me know in a comment below. I'll be compiling and responding to feedback in a Q&A video later on. Also, my channel is small and won't be releasing videos daily, so you're unlikely to see them unless you hit those YouTube buttons you always hear about. It costs nothing and lets you know when my content comes out, and it gives me that dopamine hit I need to keep working on the series. So please subscribe, like the video, and write something to me in the comments. It really means a lot. With that being said, let's get into the keyword review with DUA-Umbra. And yes, I know it's DUA, but it reads like DUA in my head, so we're gonna go with that. Playstyle Prediction. English Ivan's keyword is a balanced mix of control, disruption, value, and reliable damage. Ivan jumps around and disrupts enemies using summons, staggered, and his totem, while his crew does a mix of supporting, disrupting, damage, and scheming of their own. They cover the board in concealing terrain and use that concealment for accurate attacking while reaping the usual defensive benefits. DUA-Umbra can be less directly durable than other keywords, but playing to their strengths and mitigating attacks with tricks will see them winning games. I expect Ivan to be a master in every Explorer's collection. Keyword features. Ungentlemanly Affairs is the keyword ability for DUA models. This is hands down one of the best abilities in the game, making the negative flip from Distracted, Concealment, and Friendly Fire into a positive. Not only does this remove these defensive options from your opponent, it makes it incredibly easy for DUA models to dodge weak cards, win duels on the flip, and pressure the opponent to cheat. Remember that using Distracted isn't voluntary like Focus, Concealment only applies to non-melee attacks, and Friendly Fire only applies to gun attacks. Ignoring 1 inch of concealing terrain is voluntary though, so you can always choose to suffer from Concealment for the plus flip. Born of Shadow is the keyword ability for Umbra models, except for English Ivan himself. It makes the area within 1 inch of Umbra models count as concealing terrain. This is useful for helping friendly models with certain abilities, actions, and triggers, or for general defense by forcing enemies who can't ignore it to focus with ranged attacks. This applies when attacking allies as well, which is great for disrupting the opponent but makes many out-of-keyword choices suffer anti-synergy with Ivan. A third feature of Ivan's crew is generating many concealing, destructible shadow markers. These are used for ungentlemanly affairs, defensive concealment, and a handful of actions and triggers. Your options for generating shadow markers are Ivan's Shockwave, Ivan's Summon Upgrade, Gibson's bonus action, the Lingering Shadow trigger on Mordrake, Nocturne, and Deva, and the Trail of Dusk trigger on Ivan, Mordrake, and Operative. Note that Trail of Dusk is an immediately trigger and doesn't require passing the duel. Ivan will want markers near both allies and enemies, and will prefer not using his crew's most valuable models to create them when they could be using more directly productive actions. You'll want to consider your crew's shadow marker generation when hiring to avoid using Ivan as a shadow marker factory for his own crew. Master and Totem. English Ivan, 15 cost master. English Ivan is a mixed damage dealer and summoner master with some support abilities. He's slow walking, but Shadestep with his 10-inch ranges are enough to give him a significant presence across a large amount of the board, assuming he has shadow markers or Umbra to leap to. 90% of the time, Ivan wants to be spamming Runic Siphon. He should have no trouble attacking through concealment by standing on or behind a shadow marker, making Siphon far above an average attack at stat 6, min 3, and staggered. It also enables summoning. Unlike the summoning of other masters, Ivan summons minions in base contact with enemies through his attack, and still deals 2-3-4 damage while doing so. Summoning Nocturnes requires attacking an enemy of willpower at least 3, Deva 5, and Brock Inspectors 6. Ivan ideally wants at least a Deva every turn. Having to win an opposed duel does mean that Ivan can summon expensive models on lower cards, but the opponent has some means of making it more difficult. Ivan first needs an additional crow in his duel total, which can come from a stone or card suit. Using a soul stone gives him the second crow guaranteed, but can be wasted and alerts the opponent to cheat as high as possible since Ivan is obviously going for the summon. This isn't ideal, but there is a better plan. It's unlikely your opponent will have the cards to cheat very high on all 3 of Ivan's attacks, so the ideal scenario would be to not spend the stone, win the initial duel to make the opponent cheat first, and then cheat a crow. The crow can be drawn naturally or come from Gibson's tools for the job. Runic Siphon is at a stat 6 and has access to Distracted and Focus for plus flips, so Ivan will be looking to stack those conditions to win as many initial flips as he can. Black Soulstone is Ivan's Shadow Marker generator and AoE attack, but it isn't as good of a use for Ivan's AP as Runic Siphon is most of the time. When you do use it, definitely go for one of the triggers. Drawing a card or getting 2 actions out of 1 AP make this much more worth it. Encroaching Shadows is a great movement action, but it costs some Master AP, so look to use it only when it enables a really strong play. Note that Ivan can target himself for a 6-inch push rather than a 4-inch walk, and target Shadow Markers to enable a combo with Mordrake, but we'll talk about that later. Ivan is fragile for a Master at 5 defense and only 11 health, so he relies greatly on Dark Deception to stay alive. At any one time, Ivan will want a nest of at least 2 to 3 Shadow Markers nearby, as long as large enemy threats remain on the board. When placing these markers, try to spread them in various directions to the limits of the 2-inch bubble. This way Ivan will still have one in range if he's pushed a short distance. This Shadow Marker dependence also makes Ivan much more vulnerable to many small instances of damage rather than large focused shots, so he'll need to be careful and play defensively against crews which can output lots of pings. Black Mirror is primarily for putting distracted or focused on Ivan, but also makes Ivan immune to negative conditions as long as Mordrake is alive. Sustaining Shadows is an awesome heal aura, mostly for later in the game after some threats die. Until then, Ivan primarily wants to stay further than 6 inches from the enemy crew where Umbras will be summoned. And finally, Ivan's Converter can remove enemy scheme markers, score Ivan schemes for free, or be used as a source of Shadow Markers. Having a way to place scheme markers within 4 inches of each other is always nice to have. Also, since it happens without any AP investment and has a generous 6-inch range, it can be used to bluff a scheme like leave your mark or spread them out if you have a spare Shadow Marker laying around. Overall, English Ivan is extremely impactful between his summons, damage, tricks, and AP efficiency. He's going to want to jump immediately into range and start summoning turn 1, so be prepared to get him there and keep him protected so you don't lose his power on the table. Mr. Mordrake, 6-cost Enforcer Totem. Mordrake is an immortal annoyance who can occasionally impact the game immensely by burying an enemy model. Most of the time, he'll be shade stepping towards some enemies to engage or body block them and deal some damage. Then he eats some attacks and respawns to do it again the next turn. Occasionally though, he can bury his target until a Shadow Marker is destroyed. If done near a clump of enemies, this is kinda like giving slow to the enemy which removes the terrain. But if done to an isolated model, this could eat up entire enemy activations or be practically impossible. The stat of the action is 5 against move, and Mordrake has no way of generating the crow. But between Mordrake's 2 attacks, staggered, Gibson's blinded by the light, and winning the duel before cheating down, the possibility is always a threat and there are many options available to get it to work. If the model isn't rescued immediately, the task can be made even harder with Ivan's Encroaching Shadows, or by moving a Brocken on top of the marker to block line of sight. Just imagine your master gets buried turn 2 and Ivan pushes the marker into his deployment zone with 3 AP. Disgusting. Drag Under is decent for giving Mordrake something to do at range. It comes with a plus from Concealment, and the Tome trigger can be used for spreading Distracted on turn 1 at the cost of staggering a friendly model. Mordrake's immortality comes from his demise, so he'll have to wait to engage if the opposing crew has a demise ignoring effect. When killed, he comes back with 2 health and shielded 1 near Ivan, who takes 2 damage, so without healing Ivan, there's a limit to how many times Mordrake can die. This also makes the 2 vulnerable to blasts, especially one which target willpower, so try using Mordrake or Ivan to block line of sight to the other depending on which stat can be attacked. When Mordrake activates near Ivan, he heals up to 4, and after getting a hit he's back to his full 5 health. This will eat considerable resources turn after turn as the enemy has to take him down. Mordrake is slow to move and requires concealing terrain for shade step though, so he can quickly get into the main conflict using Scattered Shadows or a friendly Umbra, but don't expect him to be able to catch up to scheme runners if they can run away to a place without concealing terrain. One last thing to note is that if Mordrake is in a bad position and it'll take too much AP to get him into a good one, using an AP from a different model to kill him off will teleport him to Ivan straight away. Overall, Mordrake's effectiveness is going to come down to what options the opponent has for dealing with him. Against some matchups, he's going to have to stay in the back and not do much, but in others, he's just going to eat so many resources for the opponent to get him out of his way constantly. He makes for a great model for Ivan to use. Umbra Models. Living Shadow, Summon Upgrade. Unlike most summon upgrades which give slow, Ivan's gives stunned. This is both better and worse, as the summon can attack or move twice, but can't use Umbra Models' excellent triggers on their first activation. The other two abilities are for dropping shadow markers. The Demise drops a shadow into base contact with the model who killed the summon, not the summon itself. It doesn't work if the model dies to hazardous terrain or conditions. Split is the easiest access to shadow markers, but asks you a difficult question by having the model take 2 damage. When using it, consider if taking the 2 damage will be the difference in dying or living to incoming attacks, how easily it can be healed off, and how useful the marker is to you. Brock Inspector, 8 cost minion. The easiest way to categorize the Brock Inspector is by pointing out that it's a much better version of a Kirio, Kirai's excellent totem. This is Ivan's version of a stretch summon, like the Executioner or Jorogumo, which require 13s. Ivan needs to hit the enemy with his stat 6 attack against a willpower 6 model. This means that a 13 will almost always succeed, but to have the opportunity in the first place, Ivan is giving up the opportunity to attack lower willpower models to get easy hits in. Let's start with defenses. The Defense 6 and Born of Shadow Umbra kit, Terrifying, giving Distracted with a defensive trigger, and 8 wounds make the Brocken a force to be reckoned with. This is clearly geared towards not getting hit rather than more common damage reduction resilience, which I think is better most of the time. Its willpower isn't even awful at an average 5, and it has 2 situational heals. Pretty good. For the Brocken's first big payoff, we have Withering Away. Usually this won't make too much of a difference, but against crews which specialize in healing, summoning a Brocken can swing the game wildly in Ivan's favor. Next, Death Touch. Death Touch ignores all damage reduction, becoming an effective 3-4-5 against 1 reduction or 4-5-6 against 2. The Fall into Darkness trigger can place the target anywhere in concealing terrain and is best used placing a non-unimpeded model into forests or on the other side of impassable terrain. This can effectively remove models for the game for a turn while they struggle to get back. Envelop in Shadow is a fine bonus action. The damage isn't going to be much at range, but getting 2 or 3 on adjacent enemies consistently doesn't seem hard. The triggers really shine on this action though. Fall into Darkness appears again and can also be used on friendly models without damaging them much or at all for a bit of extra movement. And all your heals is always strong, giving the Brocken all the mobility it needs to reach better targets. Now we get to Hallowed Glory. This might be one of the dumbest actions I have ever seen. Let it sink in that this action only needs a 6, can be used twice, moves enemies in a massive area, locks them into engagement where they have concealment and can't heal, damages them with no resist, and if triggers, staggers them, all in one action. Now, the most important part of that was damages them with no resist. It might be true that there's a resist for the movement effect, but read the action carefully and you'll see that the 2 damage will always apply whether they fail the duel or not, as long as they're in base contact. Unless the Brocken has a good target for Death Touch, when summoning, place it in base contact with 2 enemies and use this twice. Then activate at the top of the following turn and use it twice again, now with a mask for the stagger trigger because you're no longer stunned. If we assume no other models are pulled into base contact, that already does 16 damage with no chance to resist. 16. Now, before we get to the final verdict, remember that the final verdict is only for hiring, not for summoning. So final verdict? In keyword, 2 stars. The Brock Inspector is a powerful Swiss Army knife, but a slow one if deployed. Summon one whenever possible, but without on your heels, it suffers from a 4-inch move stat and needs help. Don't hire one except in keywords with a lot of healing or armor 2, but not much willpower 6. Out of keyword, 2 stars. The Brocken is slow and expensive, but provides concealment and has a good kit for some rare situations. Deva, 7 cost minion. The Deva is Ivan's go-to summon, since summoning on willpower 5 isn't nearly as hard to force through, and the Deva is much stronger than Nocturnes. The combination of Clingy, Latch On, and Made to Kill make for quite the annoying trifecta. Made to Kill gives the Deva a free attack when it's summoned, when Gibson's Bridge places it, or when On Your Heels or Clingy triggers. Clingy is a roughly 50-50 without staggered, and has to be taken regardless of the source, distance, or type of movement effect, so the test will come up often. Their bulk is solid. 7 health takes them out of one-shot range, and with the Umbra kit they are difficult to hit and can heal. Willpower 4 is its weakness, but who cares, most willpower attacks are going to need focus to hit them if you position properly. Their attack action is an effective stat 6, but has a relatively poor 2-3-4 damage track. Having 3 triggers on different suits is excellent though after stunned wears off. Remember to aim the bowled over trigger in a direction you want to push the enemy when summoning or placing, just in case you get it. Veterans of Malifaux will already know Mimic can be incredible, but it's even better than usual on the Deva, who synergizes so well with melee attacks. It extends the Deva's engagement range, lets it keep using the copied attack with Made to Kill for the rest of the turn, and with no resist, the On Your Heels trigger lets the Deva place and get a free attack. Whatever is copied is on a stat 5, but remember Latch On, so melee attacks can often be stat 6. There's a lot of different things Mimic can be used for. In keyword, some of the best Mimic abilities include Gibson's Firefly or Heal, Mordrake's Melee for the Berry trigger and heal, Ava's Secret Passage or 2-inch melee, Rook's Staggering Punch with built-in staggered and 4 triggers, or the Brocken's Irreducible Attack or Pulse. We can be a lot more clever out of keyword though. The possibilities are endless, but some that stand out to me are Austera's Discard 2 Draw 2, the Dam's Breath of Frost, Mikhail's Melee or Shockwave, the Intrepid Emissary's attacks, Tannenbaum's Marker Movement, and Vernon and Wells' attacks. Don't forget you can copy enemy attacks too, and for some things you can even get it at a higher stat than the enemy does. An unresistible Mimic on your heels into 3 attacks is very scary. As a summon, Deva are great and will be appearing often. Final verdict? In keyword, 2 stars. Although they can copy Firefly on first turn and stack extra distracted, as a higher their move 4 severely hinders them just like the Brocken Spectre, and they can only on your heels on enemies not allies, so they're unable to help themselves. Out of keyword, 3 stars. The Deva can do a lot of interesting things with Mimic and provide concealment to your crew as long as it's helped with movement. Check them out in Wastrel in particular. They can receive artifact upgrades, create scrap, and synergize very well with Rough Riders. Nocturne, 5-cost minion. The Nocturne is a flexible support Umbra. Its 5 health puts it in danger of dying to a focused severe damage 5, and willpower 3 is incredibly low, but positioning and the Umbra kit make it a pain to attack with anything but a sniper. Dusk Hunter is amazing not only for the 134 damage track, but also for hitting the TN and triggers on Displace without having to cheat. The 0-inch range on its melee is bad, but summons go in base contact and hired Nocturnes aren't looking to attack in melee anyway. Displace is a great support action for Ivan. 8-inch range is far enough, and near a shadow marker it has an 80% chance to succeed. The other 20% of the time, it still removes 2 weak cards from the deck and can be cheated with a 6, so it's not even that bad of a result. Moving DUA models 3 inches and giving them distracted is a great use for a 5-cost AP, since DUA models have short 6 to 8 range actions and don't want to use AP to walk. It can also save Ivan when he's pushed away from a shadow marker nest or activate Gibson's Bridge. Against enemies, Displace can screw with engagement, positioning, or charge lanes while handing out distracted, or just pressure the opponent to cheat. The triggers are both fantastic, giving the Nocturne a short move to keep up with the crew, or giving DUA models a source of shadow markers other than Ivan or Gibson. The marker is placed in base contact after the push, which is perfect for offense and defense. Unless the Nocturne wants to heal, it has no bonus action though, so it's effectively wasting an AP every turn. Generally, Ivan wants to summon better Umbra, but Nocturnes are easy to summon and they can attack enemies fairly well near shadow markers. They can also disengage and run away with Walk 6 unimpeded and threaten schemes. The other summons are far better, but getting a Nocturne almost for free while attacking low willpower enemies anyway is no way a bad deal. Final verdict? In keyword, 3 stars. The Nocturne is fragile, but provides useful support and disruption for Ivan. Keep it safely in the back to push, give distracted, and generate shadow markers. Out of keyword, 1 star. The Nocturne provides little other than some short pushes and concealment on a fragile model. DUA models. Corvus Rook, 9-cost henchman. Rook is one of the most flexible offensive threats in the game. He basically has 3 main modes of operation. The first is the most infamous among talk on forums already, charging in and double executing. If you can whittle down the enemy hand, Rook goes offensive and forces some Soulstone discards or outright kills things with his stat 7 and built-in Crow. He can only manage to do this maybe once before dying, and the more threatening this is, the more they're going to target Rook. The second is charging in and attacking normally for some mixed effects, using Price of Progress minimally or accepting which trigger you get. Just remember Shove Aside needs to push you in base contact with a different enemy due to the 0-inch range, and doesn't allow triggers on the generated attack. The third is ranged control with pressure. Sporting a stat 6, often with at least one plus flip, it can either obey the enemy or deal 2 damage and discard a random card. The emphasis there is on random, so a majority of the time it's a worse outcome for the opponent than letting him pick the discard. The combination of an obey effect and the pulled here and there trigger can especially destroy enemy positioning by moving them further away from allies than their charge or around terrain corners. The marker within 3 inches is pretty easy to set up, or might just happen accidentally. While he's threatening the enemy, he can sometimes aid in scheming by dropping markers with his tome trigger, denying with remove evidence, or revealing enemy schemes. His ram trigger tell me what you know will not always help though. The opponent can choose an already obvious unrevealed scheme. It'll be interesting to see if anyone will choose to discard despite having an obvious scheme to bluff. Rook is also great at helping Ivan optimally summon. Backroom Dealings checks what summons your opponent can deny, and remove evidence can draw you an extra card once per turn. All the discards and cheating Rook can force only helps more. Rook's weaknesses are his movement and sustainability. His move 6 isn't bad, but like I say with any model this impactful, every move action is a waste. This is especially true due to Rook's 0-inch melee range. The pulled here and there trigger helps with this, but Rook needs to win a duel and without a mask takes a damage to try. 6/6 defenses with flexible morality is similarly not bad defensively, but ignoring flexible morality is in your opponent's control, and effectively Rook only has 5 to 7 health if you include using Price of Progress. The lack of healing for non-Umbra models in Keyword means that Rook is going to die eventually. Slippery is initially hard to rate. It can protect Rook against charge angles or distance. That makes it seem like a defensive ability, but I think Slippery is better treated as a don't mind me in disguise. Rook already has his tome trigger to drop markers, but with this he can interact with strategy markers depending on what's in gaining grounds too. Final verdict? In Keyword, 4 stars. Rook is an extremely dangerous threat, but may need some support to be optimal, and is considerably worse against crews who draw lots of cards. Out of Keyword, 2 stars. 10 cost is expensive, and out of Keyword there's no shadow marker synergy, but in scheme marker heavy pools, Rook destroys card hungry crews if given movement and healing support. That's quite a narrow niche, but it exists nonetheless. Gibson DeWalt, 8 cost henchman. Gibson is Ivan's support henchman and kitted perfectly for being one, but is squishy and doesn't have enough actions to do everything. 5/6 defenses and 8 health with shielded 1 is going to fall apart if targeted with focused attacks through concealment, but Gibson can operate from around 6 inches behind your DUA models, putting him at a safe distance, at least initially. His 2 most important features, and why he's an auto-take, spoiler alert, are Tools for the Job, which lets you grab a high card each turn to ensure Ivan summons, and Mechanical Firefly, which is the main way DUA spreads distracted to multiple models. It's important to remember that friendly models can't relent on simple duels, so you'll have to cheat down if you succeed against the Shockwave. Mordrake can pass his distracted to Ivan though, so it's almost like Ivan gets 2 chances at the distracted +2. Nuclear Shadow isn't that important, so just take it as a free bonus if it comes up. Firefly ideally wants to be used every turn to keep Ivan on positives, while also tagging whichever other DUA models you can manage. But as the game goes on, other priorities are going to take precedence. Blinded by the Light is strong, especially for Ivan summoning against Willpower 6, or for Mordrake to bury with a moderate Crow. Gibson is not going to succeed trying to plunge into the enemy crew and apply this to everyone, but it makes for a very good counterpunch to anything that plays too aggressively. His wrench will often be a personal heal for Ivan, since Umbra summons will be too far away near the enemy. If Tools for the Job or the duel gets a tome, charging for movement, drawing a card, and healing 2 health is an AP well spent. Chromatic Aberration is very flexible, either giving focused or distracted, and being able to trigger for fast at the cost of 2 damage. The stat 7 is great for setting up Blinded by the Light, and against friendlies the required 7 is made easy by concealment. If Gibson targets Mordrake, he can give him fast while giving Ivan focus through Black Mirror, and damage on Mordrake doesn't matter much. Other options for fast can be Ava to secret passage twice and drop a scheme, or Rook to charge and execute 3 times. Just be careful, 2 damage isn't nothing, and non-Umbra models don't have healing in Keyword. Gibson's bonus action drops a shadow marker anywhere within 6. It's the most unrestricted shadow marker placement in the crew other than Black Soulstone. The bridge trigger lets Gibson place Umbras from one marker to another, roughly up to 7 inches away if you include base size. It can give Devas free attacks, move Ivan to safety, move slow Umbra around, or considerably help getting out of corner deployment on turn 1. This improves the usefulness of tiny pushes like the Nocturnes or Intrepid Effigies considerably. Don't be afraid to bridge short distances, this action isn't just for movement. Any Umbra model can charge into the bridge and then use the charge attack on the other side, so if you're clever you can really surprise an opponent from an angle he doesn't expect. So those are all useful things Gibson can do, but he only has 2 AP, so he can't use everything at once. Gibson will usually want to Firefly Chromatic, but on defense he can Firefly heal or double heal, and when you really need to blind someone, a double stat 7 Chromatic may be necessary. Walking is a wasted opportunity, so avoid it with a charge when Gibson heals and try to have Ivan operate in Gibson's range. Using a cheaper model to move Gibson into a central supporting position will help a lot. Final verdict? In keyword, 5 stars. Simply an auto take. Out of keyword, 1 star. Gibson's support abilities are geared specifically towards Ava Havenhand, 7 cost Enforcer. Ava is a model unlike any other in the game. The most important thing on her card is her bonus action, Lock Away. Most obviously with this, Ava can make a friendly model virtually untargetable in melee, or lock Mordrake's berry marker to make it almost unremovable. That's already great, but the insanity only starts there. With Secret Passage, Don't Mind Me, and her 2-inch engagement, Ava can teleport 12 inches, drop a ski marker, immediately lock it, and
nothing personnel, kid.
Suddenly she's nearly untargetable in melee, has concealment, and all enemies within 2 inches can't do anything except disengage. It's almost like giving all of them slow. This only gets worse when you can use Umbra and Terrain to block escape paths. Models unable to move out of engagement with Ava basically lose their activation, so she can trot models completely late in the turn after anything that can move her has already activated. If Ava wins initiative, she uses Lock Away again and then attacks, runs off to Scheme, or whatever else. Just be aware of what options the opponent has to remove Scheme and Shadow markers. If the opponent can remove it with an action or ability from over 2 inches away, she might be in trouble. Her whip has the aforementioned 2-inch engagement and forces discards if the opponent doesn't want to be moved. It's primarily for engagement or disruption because the damage is awful without a trigger. In the right situations, both Shadowpin and Sweeping Strike are fantastic. Derringer is low range for a shooting attack, but ridiculous with ungentlemanly affairs. Target enemies engaged by Umbra models and flip double positive or triple positive. The possibility of coordinated strike puts a lot of pressure on the opponent without ever requiring a card from your hand if you don't want to use it. On top of all of that, Don't Mind Me and Secret Passage obviously make her a great scheming threat. Just remember Secret Passage needs an 8, so if you want to do it multiple times, it's going to require something from your hand probably. Scoundrel is a weird ability. Try to guess what your opponent will attempt to do next and set the cards to hinder that. If the next opposing activation will be a model locked away, place the lowest card on top for a failed disengage. Or maybe the opposite, place a 13 on top to waste it on the disengage so it won't be flipped on attack or damage. Place a moderate followed by a weak severe if you expect an attack and negative damage flip. Place a card that will fail a Brocken's Terrifying. Place a 13 so that they waste it on a Brocken's Terrifying. Place 2 severes on damage if Ivan's just going to reduce that damage to 0 anyway. Be creative, but for the most part don't worry too much about it. If anything about Ava isn't perfect, I guess it's her sturdiness. The hard part is getting a chance to hit her, not actually dealing damage. She won't be one-shot at 7 health, but she's easy enough to hit with 5/5 stats, and flexible morality is in your opponent's control to ignore. If she does go down, at least she ate considerable resources before doing so. Final verdict? In keyword, 5 stars. The flexibility of Ava to shut down threats, generally disrupt, protect allies from being attacked, pump out damage, or play the ski marker game makes her an auto take. It's hard to think of any context where she can't contribute. Out of keyword, 3 stars. The things Ava brings to the table can be utilized with any crew, especially the ones that generate markers. Even without distracted and shadow marker synergy, she's an excellent option to consider. Operative, 5 cost minion. The Operative is a polarizing choice because she's so fragile despite bringing so many things for just 5 stones. Let's get the downside out of the way. 5 health and 5/5 defenses is already in grave danger of getting one-shot with a severe, and if she uses Price of Progress just once, she puts herself in danger of getting one-shot by a moderate 4 damage track. That's pretty bad. If getting one-shot is one side of the spectrum, let's look at the other side. The perfect operative activation goes something like this. The operative is in base contact with a shadow marker and within 11 inches of an enemy who is within 2 inches of a scheme marker. The scheme marker can just be there coincidentally or intentionally placed by Ivan's Converter, Ava, Rook, or an out-of-keyword pick like Austera. She uses Ambush to push and shoots the enemy twice with double positive, if not triple, from Gentlemanly Affairs, probably winning both duels on the flip and either forcing cheats or dealing 2-3 damage. After each of these attacks, whether she hit or missed, Setup for Success draws a card, so she gets 2 total. Suffice to say, moving 3 inches, which can exit engagement, probably dealing 3 to 5 damage, and then guaranteeing drawing 2 cards all in one activation is a value completely unheard of on a 5-cost model. But that's not even all she can do. She can deny enemy scheme markers from up to 18 inches away with a Walk Ambush Arson or 2 markers with an Ambush Arson Arson. She can drop shadow markers without fail by Price of Progressing Arson with a Crow as long as there's a scheme to target. She has a 1-inch engagement range, which is actually better than most models at this cost that are primarily shooting. She can ambush walk charge a friendly model to drop scheme markers around 15 inches away from her starting position if you include base sizes, or charge a closer friendly model and attack it twice to drop 2 scheme markers within 4 inches of a third one. This can be amazing for things like Leave Your Mark. Unfortunately, doing any of these things will likely have her killed very soon, but I guess that's just the risk you take when you take an operative. Last but not least, we have one of the most unique abilities in the game. Infiltrator gives her immunity from a significant set of abilities, actions, and triggers. Most importantly, she ignores Terrifying and Manipulative, making her essentially ruthless. Anything additional is going to be matchup dependent, so just take a look at what the opposing keyword does and how much they can ignore. Benefiting from opposing pulses and auras is going to be even more rare, but it might sometimes happen. Final verdict, in keyword, 3 stars. From talking with other players, I think most of them don't agree with me on this, but I think despite the operative's vulnerable health total, what she's actually capable of on the board is so good that I'd be pained giving her less than 3 stars. With Ivan's crew having weak willpower, I would consider taking 2 operatives against Terrifying crews especially. The 2 that come to mind are Nightmare and Tormented, both of which rely on Terrifying and several enemy-only actions that can't target operatives. Out of keyword, 1 star. For 6 stones and with less synergy, I would definitely pass. Out of keyword choices. Firstly, Chronicle effects. With Ivan, Gibson, Mordrake, and other Umbra, Chronicle effects have a lot of opportunity to trigger, so Seeker models out of keyword are definitely on the table for Ivan's crew. As always, the out of keyword section is never going to be an exhaustive list, but let's go over some of my favorite picks. Intrepid Effigy and Emissary as always starts off the list. With all these positive flips and access to a lot of simple duels, Ivan's crew is going to be healing a lot as long as they stay in range of the aura. The Emissary also helps immensely with keeping important models alive, while the Effigy has small pushes which can help with Gibson's bridge or get models near markers for their own abilities. Vernon and Wells also make a great choice. Their attack has staggered synergy and they can drop scheme markers which Ivan can then turn into shadow markers. But more importantly, Vernon and Wells heavily punish the opponent for taking lots of willpower attacks against Umbra. With shadow markers everywhere on the board, targeting Vernon and Wells or any friendly model near them with willpower attacks becomes almost impossible. Speaking of impossible to hit, we have Winston Finnegan with Luck Thief. Luck Thief cancels positive flips before positive flips and negative flips cancel themselves, so if Winston has concealment, he's virtually untargetable unless you can ignore it. He can also give Distracted with no chance to resist, which activates Gibson's Blinded by the Light. The downside is his gun and bonus action will suffer from concealment, so essentially the bonus action has a 1-inch range and the gun should almost not be used. Botanists of course make a great choice with all the shadow markers that can be destroyed to get them going. They even come with some staggered synergy on their melee attack. The Hopeful Prospect is a strange case with DUA-Umbra. They bring a lot of upside like card cycling, healing, condition removal, and extra focus, but they can't remove conditions or heal without also getting rid of all the distracted and focus you're going to be stacking. Their gun also suffers from concealing terrain. By itself, this isn't a problem because they're going to be focusing anyway, but if the enemy is engaged and the Hopeful Prospect suffers friendly fire, they're never going to get a hit. The big payoff though is that Umbra has the best minion in all of Explorers. Whether you painstakingly set it up or just get lucky, the Hopeful Prospect can replace with a Brocken and then affect the board for way more than its 4 stone initial cost. Mikhail the 16th synergizes absurdly well with Deva. His melee attack is one of the best things you could ever mimic, and Entomb is pretty good with all the staggered and shadow markers lying around. Caught in the Ring is great for protecting friendly models, and Umbra has enough healing to keep him mobile. Counterplay. Every model in the crew has distinct weaknesses. Ivan is flimsy for a master when pulled away from his shadow marker nest or when being pinged rather than taking large hits. Mordrake is vulnerable to ignore demise. DUA models don't have hard to wound or armor. Umbra have low willpower and are summoned near enemies, making it hard to avoid anti-summoning effects. Take out of keyword models that can exploit these weaknesses. It should go without saying that models who ignore concealment or spread focus hurt the crew's resilience immensely. I've heard many people talking about building their crew without willpower 6 models to prevent Ivan from summoning a Brocken, but I actually recommend the opposite. Ivan is perfectly happy shadow pinning low willpower models and easily summoning Deva instead of risky Brocken. If it's not good for your keyword, don't shoot yourself in the foot just to muck up Ivan's shoe. You're probably better off taking good models that you're already familiar with. Ivan's crew is hungry for good cards with the right suits and puts immense pressure on the opposing hand, especially with Rook on the table. Always take some extra card draw, and if you can manage, put pressure on Ivan's hand too. Kill Gibson and consider random discard effects to try discarding the cards that he wants to keep. With the exception of Ivan's primary attack, both keywords suffer from below average damage tracks and only deal 2 with actions like Black Soulstone and Hallowed Glory. Ungentlemanly affairs and poor moderate or severe damage makes DUA models prefer quantity over quality when attacking. This makes defensive abilities like Armor 1 and Terrifying very effective. Armor 2 options can be vulnerable to lots of ping damage and the Brocken's irreducible attack, but Armor 1 models don't typically sacrifice much for that damage reduction and will cut all those incoming 2 damage in half. Lastly, if you really hate Ivan, just play Rezzers. No good Explorers player should ever declare Ivan into Rezzers, because if the enemy declares Transmortis, Ivan might as well forfeit. Transmortis is already one of the best keywords in the game, and with Monos they have nearly every counter on this list. And with that, DUA-Umbra is complete. Here's a summary of the ratings. I just finished a script, so let me know which keyword you want me to work on next in the comments below. As always, thanks for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Do a barrel roll!